Welcome back. So, today I wanted to discuss a class of soldier that does not exist in the game yet, but I truly hope comes to an enlisted near you in the not so far off future. People like to throw around all sorts of different ideas for the game, and a lot of them have been really cool, but one that I've very rarely seen discussed are irregulars and partisans. So, we have the Volkssturm in game already to some extent with squads that used to be in Berlin. Some of them will be labeled like the first Volkssturm, or for example, we have the premium squad with the labels, and that's really cool. But there's an entire chunk of the war that is full of interesting history and heroes to their people that is just completely absent from the game right now. There were major resistances all over Europe, whether it's the Yugoslavian resistance, whether it's the Polish resistance, whether it's Soviet partisans fighting behind enemy lines, or the French resistance, for example. Pretty much every major nation, or every nation in general, that got conquered in the war had some level of resistance. And we do see some of the equipment in game. For example, there's a squad for the Soviets with the PPD-44, where it talks about how it was designed to be used by partisan forces. I think the RD-50 or whatever it's called, the old Battle Pass hand grenade launcher doohickey thing. I think they talked about how that was popular with partisans and whatnot. But I would love to get a partisan slash resistance class. And what would they look like and how would they work? Because that's really the important part of this video. I can sit here all day and I can list different ideas of things that could be in the game, but if I don't give you how they'd be implemented, then I'm just spitballing, throwing up buzzwords on a board. But no, really, I've thought about how these guys would work. So, partisans work in small numbers. So, in my mind, it should be a five-man squad, just because personally I don't like squads smaller than five-man squads. You could make an argument for it being a four-man squad. And so your partisan squad should have four or five people. I think that the way that they should be equipped should be more along the lines of paratroopers, where they can be equipped with whatever you want to give them. I don't think that giving them specialists is the way to handle things. Like, if you want a partisan that uses a scoped rifle, you give them a scoped rifle. I don't think you need to have a dedicated sniper. Likewise, if you have one with AT equipment, I don't think that they should have, a dedicated AT soldier either. They're partisans. So the thing that I haven't quite worked out is whether or not they should just be able to get all tech tree equipment, or whether they should be able to only have certain equipment that gets like a partisan tag on it. Because being partisans, they should be kind of under equipped. So my initial thought is that if you take a partisan, they should take a 1 BR penalty on any equipment you give them. So if it's a BR3 piece of gear, it should become BR4 when they use it, right? Um, but that might not be the best way to handle it. They could also just come out with equipment that can go onto them. But the thing is, it shouldn't just be here's your rifle or here's your submachine gun, because they should be able to equip both. And I think it would take a lot to develop a pool of equipment for them, but they could initially release them and have all of the bolt action rifles available to them, and then have come out with partisan SMGs, and have like a couple of normal SMGs that are available to them as well. So like MP40s, for example, you could give them MP40s just across the board, because they were stolen from the Germans pretty regularly. And that wouldn't be a big ask for them to have that implemented for all of the nations to use specifically on partisans. So effectively, what their mechanic would be is like, let's say you have this 5-man squad. You equip one of them with a sniper rifle. You equip two of them with MP40s. You equip two of them with Mosins, and you give them all Molotovs, and you give them all like TNT packs, right? Well, right now they just sound like an infantry squad. The cool mechanic that I want them to have is the ability to fight in the gray zone. So because partisans are effectively citizens that have risen up, they're rebels basically to the occupying force. They should be able to fight in the enemy gray zone, and I think it would be especially cool if they made it so that they would spawn in the gray zone. So initially there would only be one squad of them. I think it would be very powerful if you could run multiple of them on your lineup. So I think there should be a limiting factor on them. But I think it allows you to go behind enemy lines, to take out enemy vehicles that are hiding there, to disrupt the enemy and take out their rally points. Basically, do all of the partisan things that hamper an enemy force, that make it harder for them to occupy a territory and harder for them to fight on the front lines. And so you can have a series of spawn points. Like let's say every map has 20 potential spawn points for partisans, and they're all randomly activated per objective whenever you move forward. Because that way, if they were predictable, then the player force, like, they would always go and they would mine them, and they would camp them, and they would make sure that your partisans never got to do anything. So there should be a lot of different places where they can pop up. I guess the alternative is you could place them like paratroopers, but you'd only be able to place them on like buildings and whatnot, and have them come out of buildings. But or I don't know, tree lines. One of the two. I don't really care either way, but I think having a bunch of preset positions that are randomly activated each match is the way that I would go. But I suppose that still makes it so even if you don't know like which 5 of the 20 are active, you could still theoretically try to camp some of them. But I think it would act as a really interesting counter to a lot of the gray zone camping issues we have. I mean, obviously there's the simple solution of just get rid of the gray zone, and I think that would make a lot of people happy. But if they don't want to do that, I think there's the potential to take a really, really important piece of World War II history and give them a really unique role in game. I also think that being partisans, they probably should take certain penalties. So obviously they're going to have a perk tree like everybody else, and you'll be able to take mostly the same perks as everybody else. But I don't think it would be unreasonable to have them be somewhat unfamiliar with their weapons and not use them as well. Or, for example, you can treat their weapons as being more deteriorated because they don't have the ability to replace and repair them as readily as a proper, fully funded army. So if reloading your weapon normally takes 2.7 seconds, maybe on them it takes 3 seconds. If your bolt action rifle normally has a fire rate of 60 rounds a minute, maybe on them it fires at 55 rounds a minute. So on and so forth. Things to make them perform worse than your normal frontline, fully trained, combat experienced soldiers. But the trade-off for that, and like I said, they would usually have worse gear. So again, using the MP40 as an example, right now the MP40 is a BR2. If you put the MP40 on them, they'd play at BR3. I don't think it's unreasonable for them to have worse equipment and be kind of limited in size, but what they gain is this ability to go behind the enemy lines and to harass the enemy and to just be a thorn in their side. And I think that could be really, really fun. I mean, on the receiving end, it would probably annoy you. You'd always have to have, an eye out for them but I think it's a piece to the whole World War II big picture that's absent from the game. Like at this point, we have paratroopers. They were a cool addition. They're a little bit saturated, but they were a cool addition. We just got APCs and we got our mounted infantry, and they're really cool. But one of the things that's been on my list for a long time that I've thought about different ways that you could implement them are these partisans because they played such a big and such an important role in the war. And there's so much equipment that was designed and specifically with them in mind and given to them that it could be really cool to see how they get implemented. You could also make it so that the partisans come with completely random gear. So there could be a preset series of gear that's separated by BR. So you'd have your BR 123 set and your BR 345 set, or depending on whether you were in a low tier game or a high tier game, kind of like the paratrooper boxes, there would be a pool of gear, and each soldier would have a random roll on that gear. And so when you spawn your partisan squad, because gear's limited, you don't know what kind of gear you have. You spawn them, and each one of them gets their randomized gear. So some of them might have grenades, some of them might have Molotovs, some of them might have rifles, some of them might have submachine guns. And so you wouldn't be able to giga stack the gear. You wouldn't be able to make sure that they all have mines or anything. You'd basically just be handed this squad that you don't have a ton of control over how they're equipped, but you'd still be able to use their cool partisan mechanics and run around the enemy backline and be an asshole in the gray zone. So let me know down below. Maybe you guys think that having a bunch of pissed off rebels running around your backlines is a terrible idea and you just don't want to deal with getting shot in the back. But maybe you're like me and you think that adding these really important people to history, people who to their nations are amongst like the highest level of heroes, would be really cool. Like I said, I think it would be really cool. There are some really standout people from many different nations that really deserve to get their story told. So I would love to see them in game. As per usual, get out there, kick ass, take names, and win your games.